All right, let's jump right into today's explainer. The source material we're exploring presents an absolutely fascinating, vivid roadmap of Islamic eschatology. The theology of the end times. But what makes this specific discourse so compelling isn't just the epic, world-ending prophecies it outlines, it's how the speaker uses these grand visions of the future as a mirror to critique the very grounded, everyday socioeconomic realities of our modern world. It really bridges the gap between apocalyptic predictions and practical advice for today's community.
Here is our agenda for today. We're going to start with a prophetic sequence, move on to the predicted Great War, then snap back to reality by looking at the current crisis, holding the flag, and finally, the roadmap forward. Let's get to it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The prophetic sequence.
The source material actually lays out a super clear, step-by-step timeline of these eschatological events. It kicks off with the arrival of a figure known as Al-Mahdi. This is directly followed by the appearance of the Dajjal, or the false Messiah. Next up is the return of Isa, known in the West as Jesus. And finally, the whole thing culminates in a unified global Khilafah, a global Islamic state. This timeline is literally the foundational roadmap that all of the speaker's other arguments are built on.
What's really fascinating here is just how incredibly specific the source gets about the traits of that first figure, the Mahdi. He asserts that the Mahdi will be from the lineage of Fatima, his given name will be Muhammad, and he'll have distinct physical features, like a prominent nose and a broad forehead. The speaker heavily emphasizes that this is an Arab figure who speaks Arabic, firmly rejecting any claims of local figures from places like Punjab or Bangladesh claiming to be the Mahdi. Interestingly, the source notes he will actually refuse leadership at first out of fear of the immense responsibility, fleeing from Medina to Mecca, where people will ultimately recognize him at the Kaaba.
And this brilliantly illustrates the historical and numerical symmetry the speaker loves to draw on. According to the source, the Mahdi's initial pledge of allegiance will come from exactly 313 followers. The speaker links this directly to two of the most famous against all odds armies in Islamic history, Dalut's army and the forces at the Battle of Badr. Both of those famously numbered exactly 313. It really sets this tone of historical recurrence, like history repeating itself.
Section 2. The Great War. But before any of that happens, the source claims there is a terrifying prerequisite, a massive conflict known as Al-Mahdi.
So, what is Al-Mahdi? The speaker defines it as a predicted, unprecedented global conflict. We aren't just talking about a regular war here. The source explicitly outlines that it will be initiated by a broken treaty from European or Western forces, leading to a massive alliance. We're talking 80 different flags uniting to fight against the Muslim world. It's portrayed as the ultimate geopolitical clash.
Geographically, the speaker pinpoints the focus of this war right near the Euphrates River. The prophesied prize for this conflict is described in ancient text as a mountain of gold, but the speaker offers a completely fascinating modern interpretation. He hypothesizes that this gold likely represents petrodollars, modern-day oil, noting that oil has effectively taken the place of gold in driving today's global conflicts. He also strongly warns that Muslims must completely avoid participating in this specific scramble for wealth.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer shocking scale of the prediction. The speaker cites a prophecy stating that the warfare will be so horrific, 99 out of every 100 combatants will die, a 99% mortality rate. He reasons, quite logically, that no conventional war with swords and shields, or even standard modern firearms, could realistically cause that level of casualties. Therefore, he concludes, this must be a prediction of massive destructive technology. He's highly likely pointing to the use of nuclear weapons here.
Section 3. The Current Crisis. Having painted this incredibly bleak picture of an apocalyptic future war, the speaker sharply snaps us right back to the present day, pivoting to a heavy critique of the modern Muslim community.
He sets up this stark contrast between our current reality and the ideal state. The ideal, according to the source, is a unified state governed strictly by divine law, holding actual global political and economic power. The reality, however, the problem, is a community heavily reliant on foreign debt, entrenched in an interest-based economic system known as riba, and severely fractured from within. This quote truly captures the speaker's deep frustration. He points out that the modern Ummah, the global Muslim community, completely lacks structural power. No independent media, no unified global political state, no nuclear deterrence. And yet, instead of focusing on these massive, glaring systemic vulnerabilities, he observes people passionately arguing over minor differences in prayer pronunciations or tiny theological technicalities. He sees a community that is completely distracted from the larger geopolitical realities.
Section 4. Holding the flag. To kind of jolt his audience out of this apathy, the speaker relies on a really powerful historical anecdote.
He sets the scene at the Battle of Mu'tah, detailing seemingly impossible odds. Just picture it. You have a tiny army of just 3,000 Muslim soldiers facing down a staggering force of 200,000 enemy troops. The source explains that the Prophet appointed 3 sequential commanders for this battle: Zayd ibn Haritha, Abdullah bin Rawaha, and Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, knowing full well the heavy casualties that were about to occur. And then the speaker narrates this intense, incredibly visceral story about the third commander, Ja'far. In the absolute heat of this mismatched battle, Ja'far loses his right arm holding the flag, so he takes it in his left. When he loses his left arm, rather than letting the flag fall to the dirt, he holds it up against his chest with his chin. The speaker uses this intense imagery of unyielding dedication to symbolize the honor of the flag, basically asking his modern audience, if they could hold the flag under those horrific conditions, why are we letting it fall today through petty division and compromise?
Section 5, the roadmap forward. This historical reflection acts as a great springboard into some very practical, socioeconomic solutions.
So the crucial point is that the speaker isn't just preaching doom and gloom. He provides a very tangible roadmap for right now. Step 1 is eradicating poverty entirely through the Islamic charity system, zakat. Step 2 is a total abandonment of riba, or interest-based finance. Step 3 focuses inward on educating families and children in faith and morality, really maintaining those boundaries. And Step 4 is putting aside those minor theological squabbles to finally unite the community.
Let's look at how this builds his overarching economic theory. The speaker argues forcefully against relying on foreign loans from institutions like the IMF or the World Bank. Instead, he claims that if the community perfectly implemented the 8 designated categories of zakat, they could achieve complete financial self-sufficiency. He points to historical eras, like the rule of Umar, where poverty was supposedly eradicated to the point where they couldn't even find people to take charity. For the speaker, economic independence is absolutely intrinsically tied to spiritual success.
Ultimately, the speaker concludes that our current world order is entirely temporary. He asserts that when Isa, Jesus, returns to establish the final eschatological rule, modern global institutions will simply vanish. As he puts it, Isa won't be going to the United Nations for a resolution, and he certainly won't ask the World Bank for a loan. The overarching message here is to detach from reliance on these systems because, according to his timeline, they are destined to fall anyway.
The source material leaves us balancing right on the edge of these epic prophecies and the very mundane realities of our modern world. The speaker makes a compelling, passionate case that society is just failing to see the forest for the trees. By holding up a mirror to a community he views as fractured by minor disputes and burdened by financial compromise, he asks a challenging question. Are we too distracted by modern divisions and debt to prepare for the profound changes that have been prophesied? It's a stark contrast, for sure, and one that certainly leaves you thinking about where our daily focus truly lies.